There are more photographs being taken now than ever before, many of which are special moments and memories that can be kept forever. But as you will know, an image can sometimes leave a lasting memory for the wrong reason. Whether that's an image taken just moments before a disaster, or like number 1, is a photograph taken after a nuclear attack that shows the aftermath for those involved. Here are 5 images that wouldn't seem haunting if not for the stories to go with them. Carl Williams. In 2007, Australian drug trafficker and murderer Carl Williams was sentenced to life in prison with a non-parole period of 35 years. He was sentenced for his part in the Melbourne gangland killings, where he ordered the death of rival gang members. Whilst being held in Australia's maximum security Barwon prison in Victoria, Williams was being used by police to give information on many unsolved gang-related crimes, but mainly to help assist in the capture of criminal Rocco Arrico. It just so happens that Carl was sharing a cell with one of Arrico's accomplices, and word quickly got around about his ratting. It's thought that using a smuggled cell phone, Arrico was informed by the friend who was sharing the cell with Carl, and Arrico demanded he be killed before he spilled too much information. In 2010, fellow inmate Matthew Johnson, who has a long criminal history, was ordered to do the job. This haunting image shot from a CCTV camera shows Carl Williams sat at a table and Matthew Johnson approaching from behind, just moments before he beat Carl to death with a metal bar from an exercise bike. The beating was so extreme it's thought Carl died almost immediately. Matthew was found guilty of the murder, which he knew was being caught on CCTV, and was further sentenced to a minimum of 32 years in prison. On the afternoon of the 11th of December 2015, Koji Via Globe, a 24-year-old woman was last seen by her aunt near 7 Mile and Telegraph in Detroit, Michigan. Her absence the next day was very out of character and her family began to worry. Then 3 days later, Koji Via's car was found abandoned and her body was found in a bin behind a house. There were no clues as to how she had died or who was responsible, and despite extensive tests and the frustration of her family, the cause of her death could not be established. Then a haunting image taken from a CCTV camera at a drive-through bank was released. It was taken on the day of Koji Via's disappearance and shows a man wearing a skeleton mask using Koji Via's card to draw money out and driving her car. As of making this video, the man hasn't been identified or come forward, but Koji Via's ex-boyfriend has been arrested on suspicion of her murder, and her family believe he is responsible. It's very likely that the man in this eerie photo is her ex-boyfriend who had killed Koji Via just hours before the photo was taken. Now this next photograph is very unnerving, but before showing it, here is a brief history of the serial killer called the Candyman. His real name was Dean Kroll, and he lured victims with sweets that were made at his family business. Kroll, along with 2 other boys, 14-year-old Alma Wayne Henley and 15-year-old David Brooks, abducted, raped, tortured and murdered at least 28 young men and boys in Houston, Texas over a 3-year period from 1970 to 1973. It only came to an end in 1973 because after an argument, Henley shot Dean dead and the full horror of their crimes was released. Henley told police that Kroll had been paying him and Brooks $200 to lure young boys to his house, where he would then torture and murder them. Henley also talked about the sadistic killings and even led police to various burial sites where a total of 28 bodies were recovered. Fast forward many years later to 2012 and filmmaker Josh Varagas was researching for a documentary he planned to make on the Candyman. After interviewing Henley's mother, she revealed that after her son was convicted, horrified at his involvement with the crimes, she had boxed up all his belongings and dumped them in an abandoned school bus in a field. They stayed there untouched for 40 years until Josh rummaged through them, and to his horror, he found Polaroids of Carl's toolbox and torture instruments, along with this photograph of a young boy in handcuffs. After further investigation, including speaking to Henley in prison, it was established that it was none of the known victims and could possibly be the Candyman's 29th unnamed victim. If this is true, then the Candyman may be responsible for far more killings than what was first thought. It doesn't seem anyone else was reported missing around the time the Candyman was killing young boys, and since the Polaroid's been released, no one has come forward to identify the boy. Petra and Gary Slock. If you have a fear of flying, then do not listen to this next one because I absolutely do not want to put you off flying on an aeroplane. Looking at this photograph of a mother and her son seems like nothing more than a regular selfie, but when you hear the story to go with it, it's heartbreaking. It was taken on the 11th of July 2014 on board Malaysia Airlines Flight 17. Gary Slock, aged 15, and his mother Petra had just boarded the flight from Amsterdam on their way to a holiday in Malaysia. Just 3 hours after this photo was taken, the Boeing 777 was blasted out of the sky when cruising at 33,000 feet as it flew over eastern Ukraine, killing all 298 passengers and crew, including 80 children. There was a lengthy search to why the plane had crashed, and the official report is that it was hit by a missile, causing it to break up in midair. The missile was apparently shot by pro-Russian rebels who had used a Russian-manufactured BUK surface-to-air missile system that they had acquired. It's unsure why this particular plane was targeted, but since there were 3 other commercial airlines flying in the area, it seems it was just bad luck that the rebels chose to shoot at that one. As you know, there are tons of conspiracies for why MH17 was targeted, but I won't go into that. I just hope this doesn't put you off flying in any way, because that is not my intention. Neither is to trivialize anyone by showing this picture. And although it's haunting that this was the last photo of these 2 people, it's also beautiful in the fact that their family have one last photo of them together. I really hope the people responsible for the attack have seen this photo and know how evil they are and how many precious lives they have cut short. And I hope the 298 people killed on board that day are resting in peace. The Hiroshima Shadows. On August 6, 1945, an American B-29 bomber known as Enola Gay dropped the first ever atomic bomb over the Japanese city of Hiroshima. The effect was devastating, and the explosion immediately killed 80,000 people and wiped out 90% of the city. Just 3 days later, a second atomic bomb was dropped on nearby Nagasaki, killing a further 40,000 people. In the days that followed, Japan's Emperor Hirohito announced his country would surrender, a choice he had to make if he was to avoid the complete destruction of his country and people. At the time, US President Truman quoted the bomb as harnessing of the basic power of the universe. That's a brief summary of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki attacks, which I will go in depth with in a documentary. Now, as for the haunting images, while those who died immediately after the explosion suffered horrific flash burns and the intense heat from the blast would have literally vaporized their bodies. The carbon char from their destroyed bodies then embedded into the surface of surrounding solid objects such as concrete and stone. These haunting images, known as the Hiroshima Shadows, show the outline of the people incinerated by the initial blast. It's thought these shadows remained on stones and solid structures around Hiroshima and Nagasaki for around 10 years after the explosion, an eerie reminder of what people were doing at the moment the nuclear bombs were dropped. So that's 5 truly haunting photographs. I hope you've enjoyed, and I hope it may have reminded you how precious life is and how much we take it for granted. Thanks for watching, have an awesome day or night, and I'll see you next week for a super interesting video.